Hi everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we are back to cleaning up the field edges. These trees have been overgrowing the edges of the fields for years. And year by year, you start losing many feet from the edge of your field. So there's an old fence line here, and we got it to about here last year by standing on the roof of the Dodge pickup truck. It works out a lot better with a pole saw, but you know our situation with that. And in the meantime, we have the backhoe available. So we've been going along. He came out here yesterday with Murdoch as his operator. Murdoch lifts him up in the bucket. Sometimes it's Trey or me. And then he can cut the stuff that's overhanging so that the stack wagon can clear, because that is about 16 feet tall, I think. So they went along quite a bit and cleaned up a lot of the field edge. So in doing that, last year when we did this job, we found there is a giant rock. I don't know if you'd even call it a boulder. Somebody pulled it off of the field edge many, many years ago and left their chain on it. And there's a lot of chain there. So we are going to grab that chain, since we've got the backhoe over here, see if we can pull it out. But you know, boulders like this in our area actually sell for money. People put them in their landscaping and everything else. The trouble is there's a fence here, so the boulder's going to stay put, and we're going to just retrieve the chain. It's probably going to roll down into the river or the creek.
I'll pull it around like this. That's so weird. I think they got it stuck. It's facing the creek. I think they didn't have enough chain to pull it out that way, and then forgot it. See, because this wasn't laying on the rock. I did that years ago.
Yeah.
It was laying down in the dirt. So I think they just totally forgot. But it's been there a long time. The people that rented the farm started renting it in the 70s, and I asked, and they said no, it was there before that was.
Yep.
We'll try this. See if it'll pull it up out of there.
Don't want to mess up our beautiful fence or get caught on that. He's very particular, even with trimming trees and where this chain is going to come out. There's a nice cherry tree right here with a maple tree that's already been growing for years, and another maple tree, and then some smaller maple trees in between. So we kind of had to pick a halfway point, because you got to figure out, okay, well, I don't want to scar up and introduce bacteria or disease into the tree by pulling it out and ripping off the bark. So we found a halfway point, and he's going to try to pull it out from there. This area has a lot of immature or teenage maple trees. It hasn't been cut and trimmed in a long time. So it seems like there will be more. There's only a few mature maple trees, and a lot of them are stemming from this big maple tree back here. And it's growing on the creek side. A lot of the tree roots are exposed, so who knows how long it'll last. But it's been the mother and grandmother and great-grandmother to many, many maple trees along this row. So we haven't tapped maple trees for maple syrup in this section, but someday we'll be able to make this a nice lane of maple trees for easy sap gathering, and it's all a downhill flow and downhill to the homestead site, so you could easily tap this and set up drop lines to the other side of the creek. slide. Not quite. I don't know if that kind of an old chain would be any good, having that electrolysis from being in the ground like that for so many years. You figure that's the 1970s, that was 50 years ago. Oh yeah, she's got some dirt packed in her, sand. Maybe it doesn't affect it that much that way.
That's another piece of, that's another little separate piece of chain there with more hooks.
Yeah.
That's old.
Well, we may not be able to use it, but we can hang it up in the shop with all the old horseshoes we keep finding. Viewers have asked us in the past how many cords of wood we might use in a maple syrup season. And of course that is all relative. It depends on what you're burning, what the sugar content is of the sap, and maybe how much you've actually collected in gallons of sap. So we don't really keep track of that, and we don't stack it by the cord. We've been using our old grain bin since we're not doing grain crops at the homestead anymore. That stuff is all, you know, sent right out to bigger, larger grain storage or semi-grain storage instead. So instead of the building sitting empty, it's really good for storing the firewood for keeping it dry. And, you know, chainsaw use, we got this smaller Husqvarna chainsaw for doing the small stuff. So some of the firewood that we're saving, some people wouldn't bother with. But this small stuff is really good for starting a large fire in either the maple syrup evaporator or in the wood burner in the house. Because if all you have is split firewood or large stuff, sometimes you just need a little heat added. And, you know, every firewood pile should have some kindling added to it too. So if you don't have that kindling in the first place, this stuff works really good for small campfires and s'mores fires in the yard also. So it just depends on what you want to do with it. So if you have a large saw that is a gas hog, you know, maybe you don't want to. Gas prices are high, and we use wet gas, so that's high. It's like $5.65 the last time I bought it. You know, we generally pick up about a 2-gallon container every week and a half to 2 weeks. For the different things like the string trimmer and the chainsaw, to keep going on that. And this is generally work that we would do in the winter to not be driving on it, because you see how fast this happens. This was cut almost 2 weeks ago, and just driving in this last week along the edge, it's been dry. So all relative to when you're doing it. But it's hard to get out here in a lot of snow. The last time we were out here, you know, was 30 degrees and below freezing, working in this section up here. I'm sure you've probably heard the old adage or quote, beggars can't be choosers. I've known somebody to say that they only will burn hickory, owning their house for 7 or 8 years, having never burned a single cord of wood, where we are burning off the waste that we wouldn't put in a cord of wood to sell, heating our house in an area that is either propane only or oil heat only. Now, our house was originally probably electric heat, switched to oil heat or oil heat first. There were baseboards that were taken out and forced air put in for the geothermal system. So the geothermal system is good, but it kicks into electric at a certain point. And there's like a red light that turns on the thermostat, and that's why we have our wood add-on furnace. It's reliable, and we're being self-sufficient that way instead of really relying on the grid, which is fine, but if the power goes out, you've got no heat, and with 5 kids in the house, you can't have that. So we are basically scavenging heat, and we're fine with it, so it works for us. Sometimes you see neat things in nature, and at a glance, this looks like an owl or something. Look at that. Now, I know some of you would say it's not worth it. Well, here's a pile that we left behind from wintertime from when we went further down the lane. So this is the edge of the hayfield, and the more harvest we get from the field per acre makes it worth it to us. The other thing is, this pile is left here temporarily until we could get the manure spreader in here, so this is going to get hauled away. We don't own a wood chipper, so if we can burn it, it gets used. Now, sometimes we'll leave a brush pile like this for the rabbits to have a safe haven to get away, and maybe turn it into a home. So you have nature trees, like this one down back here. If we can't get to it, it's going to stay and be a nature tree and just decompose. Lots of microorganisms and little animals can live in it. All of this bigger stuff here, especially being green, it has to be cleaned up and hauled away. So if we can cut some of it, then more will fit in our manure spreader or landscape trailer to haul it away to our brush pile. Now, in our area, you have to have a burning permit for a brush pile. Well, that's involving people who don't necessarily need to be involved in what's going on our farm. So the brush pile sits there and decomposes, and occasionally he'll push it up into a pile and smash it down with the backhoe. It's our own compost pile. Well, that is a heck of a nature pile for the rabbits and woodchucks and everything to go hide in. So by cutting up and using this stuff, there are several benefits. The load is smaller to haul away. The small stuff gets used for starting fires or just keeping a small fire going. Especially those oak logs, that gets the house so hot, so fast that everyone's uncomfortable. So this can allow for just a small simmering fire to be going in the wood heater in the winter and getting that free hot water also. Fuel in the chainsaw, we're using fuel in the tractor to haul away the brush, which we're going to have to do anyway, and we're using fuel on the backhoe to lift it up. So we're not saving fuel on not fixing our hole saw, and it's not like we wouldn't be using fuel either way to gather firewood. It's just that we are making use of the smalls because it doesn't have to all be split firewood, which here we used to split by hand, and now we are using our county line log splitter, which also takes rec gas. Now you don't have to use rec gas, but if you want it to start next time, it's a good idea. The point is the scavenging. We're being frugal, we're using what's left over from a cleanup job that was cleaning up the edge of the field. Look at how much open we have here from working on this during the winter, and we still have areas we can go up higher where it's reaching out to the field that we couldn't get before. There's always more work to do. We've kind of worked out a system that will work on this lane, the field edge, in the morning, break for lunch, and then come and clean up the brush after lunch. and then get on with the rest of our other jobs. Being a hay farmer, you've got that advantage because you can't cut hay with the dew on it so much in the morning, and it's got to lay out dry anyway, and we're between cuttings for this field. So every time we work on the field edge, we basically work until we've got a section done that's a pretty good size section, and then we have enough firewood that fills the front, sometimes the rear bucket on the backhoe to bring back. And we've just been making it in a pile and the kids have been throwing it in, so we've got some stacking to do here. But the takeaway of all of it is this bin was empty. We haven't even started to try to make firewood, and we've been bringing home firewood from spring storm damage and things falling down. So just doing general cleanup around the farm and the field edges is supplying us with a good amount of heat for the winter, and we've got a good head start. We won't actually start making firewood until the fall. It's real hard to get out into the woods with the overgrowth. As you know, I've said before, I get poison ivy just by being around it. And of course today I went out to the field and I didn't have my gloves with me. I left them here. So I gotta go wash up and get all those oils off my hands and arms to make sure that I'm in good shape. And we'll get back into the firewood and the actual heavy cutting and log splitting and all that later in the season. So until then, you can go to our playlist. You can look at log splitters, you can look at firewood, maple syrup videos, whatever you like. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.